For these next few minutes, we're going to talk about the technologies that are key to the data lake in the form of the catalog. The catalog, as you probably know, is absolutely essential for the operation of the data lake, because the catalog in an Iceberg data lake is what provides atomic store of your latest write. And so the catalog is what gives DML operations in Iceberg and the ability to do concurrent operations at the same time. But apart from that fundamental, there are so many other things that we depend on the catalog to do. One of the most prominent is to provide multiple engine support. Now, I'm from Dremio. We're an engine provider. It may be unusual to start a presentation about the data lake talking about the need for multiple engines. But there are so many customers who depend on the ability of Dremio to do what it does for analytics, and Spark to do what it does for ETL, and Trino to do what it does for a variety of other workloads, and et cetera, et cetera. And so it's just a reality that when we talk about the data lake, we're imagining multiple engines that each have specific use cases and purposes. And unfortunately, in many situations, that has driven multiple catalogs, which is its own set of problems that we want to talk in this session about how to avoid. I was just speaking with a customer a few minutes ago who is coming from a Hive catalog background. Hive catalogs have been great for many use cases for many years. But when we have a Hive catalog, and then we have another catalog, and then another one over here, and something over there, these are all islands of individual siloed functionality that don't necessarily play together or work together. And so what we want to do is reconceive the data lake operating under the auspices of one catalog that provides access to all of our data. When we see all that great AI functionality, we want to deliver tables quickly and efficiently because AI is going to be running a phenomenal number of queries and much faster than ever before. And the only way it's going to be able to deliver all that stuff is if it gets metadata from the catalog quickly and efficiently. And that's what the catalog portion of this segment is all about. Now, there are two technologies here that are going to be fundamentally important. And in today's data lake, with Iceberg at its foundation, these two technologies are absolutely critical. Now, the first one is Iceberg Catalog REST. The second one is Apache Polaris. And these two technologies are really two sides of the same coin. Iceberg Catalog REST provides the specification for how catalogs should talk and what they should say and about what. Apache Polaris is an implementation of the standard defined in Iceberg Catalog REST. Now, the reason why I make this subtle distinction between these two is because there are actually now many implementations of Iceberg Catalog REST. AWS Glue recently announced support. Sender mentioned that we had a product launch this morning, and in that product launch, we have instructions for how to connect to Microsoft OneLake, which supports Iceberg Catalog REST. So you're not going to find a variety of catalogs in this space that support this interface. It's fundamental to the Iceberg standard. It's great because it defines the operations that a catalog should do. It defines a built-in OAuth 2 authentication framework for users that are going to be talking to the catalog. And it plays into Iceberg's concurrency control because it supports atomic operations of DML so that you can have exactly what Iceberg was conceived to do. Now, Apache Polaris, on the other hand, is an implementation of the specification. And what's great about this particular implementation of the specification is that it's complete, ready to go from the ground up. If you go to the Iceberg REST specification, and I provide a link later in case you are so inclined, you'll get a piece of paper that says what conforming catalog should do. What you get here is code that does it. Now, the Apache Polaris work group, which consists of a whole bunch of engineers operating under the auspices of the Apache Foundation, now delivers a binary product. And so you can go to this website and you can download Apache Polaris and start it and you're up and running. A lot of customers find that that's a nice thing to do in some use cases. Well, why not do that all the time? And the reason to that is because of the integration of the whole. Now here you have a platform architecture picture similar to what Tomer showed a few minutes ago. And the right way to read this lakehouse architecture picture is to start at the bottom where we've got files. And on top of that we have, in Dremio's case, the catalog based on Apache Polaris. You may have another catalog there. We could take our downloaded Apache Polaris binary and start it up on a server and put Spark on top of it, and that's a perfectly valid thing to do. You're going to have a conforming solution. But what you're going to lack is the integration of the whole, which is an acceleration layer for queries on top of that, AI-ready functions, and et cetera, et cetera. So what I want to do in this pitch is illuminate what Iceberg Catalog REST provides, how Apache Polaris delivers it, and illuminate your choices, because you have quite a few choices in this space. Let's talk about Iceberg Catalog REST. We've already mentioned that it's a specification, and it includes everything that catalog should do. It's engine agnostic, which means that I can take Spark, which currently conforms to Iceberg Catalog REST, and it will perform against any Apache Polaris or Iceberg Catalog REST client very, very well. So will Trino, so will Flink, so will a variety of other engines. In fact, I've got a demo at the last couple of minutes of this pitch where I'll run some Spark queries for you. So that's pretty nice. It provides a complete set of catalog operations, including namespaces, tables, and views, et cetera. In case you're so inclined, I've actually got the 20 or so calls that make up Iceberg Catalog REST. Now, if you're not a deeply technical person, you may wonder what in the world this is doing on the screen. And the idea here is that this stuff is so easy and fun to use that even people who may not have been so inclined in the past to pick up a development environment and start calling something like a REST specification may want to do so now. The reason is because you can obtain the same benefits as a variety of other users. A lot of people think that, oh, if I'm an engine developer, that's the set of people who probably want something as technical as Iceberg Catalog REST. I mean, I'm going to create a Spark client, which is what the Polaris community currently ships. And so, I'm going to have to get into the grunge of all this. And okay, so yeah, that's true. But if you are a normal platform engineer or a data engineer, I'm suggesting that this specification is for you as well. If you're creating any kind of automated script, any kind of an ETL job, any kind of a process that automates activities in your organization, Iceberg Catalog REST is a great platform to do that. Dremio now provides Iceberg Catalog REST in addition to other APIs, so you can combine calls to several different APIs in a single script. I'll show you a demo in a few minutes of an exact script that does that. So regardless of where you fit in the hierarchy of data analytics in your organization or what your interest may be, my suggestion is that Iceberg Catalog REST may be just the thing that could achieve some goals of yours. Now let's talk about some of its features, because it's very full-bodied and includes all the basic stuff that you'd want to have. It includes a resource model. We already mentioned that you can have a modeling for the basic things in an Iceberg catalog. Namespaces, which is another view for directories, tables, views, how we're going to access tables and views, how we're going to perform permissions on tables and views. So it's all there. We've got great documentation, versioning for the entire platform. Consistency and idempotency is a cornerstone of Iceberg, which means no matter how many times we perform an operation, we're going to get the same result. And the Polaris community added a few additional functions of their own, because not only is Apache Polaris an implementation of Iceberg Catalog REST, but they're a value-added member of the entire chain. And so you have this specification, then you have some features here that were added specifically by Apache Polaris. Let's go on and talk about Polaris, because as Dremio was one of the founders of Polaris along with Snowflake in 2024. And I mentioned that you can now go to the Polaris site and download binary of the Polaris catalog. You can also get it in a Dremio product. You can get it in a Snowflake product. And so what's so great about this? It's an actual implementation of Iceberg Catalog REST that is vendor neutral because it's created in the auspices of the Apache Foundation. It's not a Dremio product, it's not a Snowflake product, it is a combination of engineers from all different places. Tomer showed a slide a few minutes ago that there are actually more contributors to Apache Polaris than there are to Databricks in an open source context. And so there are developers from all kinds of organizations that are now contributing code in an open Apache-style governance process. It creates a catalog that is mature and ready to go for a variety of these key standards. Here is the way Dremio has deployed it in their product, and this would be typical for the way it would be in any other product. We have an Apache Polaris server here that provides a variety of features like RBAC and authorization and termination. That catalog server is where we go at the initiation of any query. When we start a query, we need to get the metadata for the table. How many rows and columns are in the table? And once we understand that and plan the query, we have to get the data of the table. So we're going to start right here at the catalog, getting the metadata for the table. And once we've planned the query here from an executor, which is another word for an engine, we're going to go up to our cloud source to get the actual data. So while the catalog is a pivotal part of the overall query process, it's not the only part. We're going to go to the catalog to get metadata. We're going to go directly to the bucket to get data. And it's going to work with your user, with your IDP. There's Spark or Flink over here, able to do the exact same thing that you could get from Dremio. You can process queries from Spark or from Dremio against this same catalog, which means that if I run a query from Spark, let's say I do a DML operation from Spark and I add 10 rows. If I then do a query from Dremio, I will see the 10 rows that Spark just added. The whole idea here is that this is your single point of truth so that any query from any data engine will be reflected to any other data engine across your data lake. It's pretty amazing, really, the degree of control and integration that you get with this catalog. Oh, wow, look at this. I've got code on the screen to show a couple of features. The first one I mentioned is that Iceberg Catalog REST is based on OAuth, which is a standard for authentication of user identity. The first thing that you're going to want any of your users to do is to prove who they are. Normally they do that with a password or a token or some such thing like that. And once they do that, they can move on to exercise functions. The way they actually prove who they are is through an OAuth flow. And Iceberg Catalog REST has built-in OAuth flows, which means that they're interoperable. Now, let me give you an example of this. If I create a Postman collection of my APIs, and I'm going to write my little script in Postman. Postman knows what OAuth is, and it knows what OAuth, and there are buttons in Postman that you didn't have to put in, specifically because it understands that the Iceberg Catalog REST interface supports OAuth. And so if I create my collection in there, it will immediately ask me, oh, what's your OAuth token? And if it's expired, it will automatically renew it. If there are other products that support OAuth, like OIDC providers, like your Microsoft Entra ID or your Okta or some other such thing like that, they all understand these standards and they fit together. Now, the reason why I'm going through this degree of detail is because when you're writing a script or a piece of automation workflow, you're going to want to do this exact thing, which looks hard, but really it's not. We're going to call one interface called OAuth token. And we're going to provide our credentials, and we're going to get back an OAuth token, and that's how we're going to integrate from there. So I'll show you this in a minute. We'll run a script. But it's insanely simple, yet very, very industry standard and totally integrated with a whole bunch of other things. Polaris provides something called table maintenance policies. Tomer touched on a few minutes ago the unbelievably important role that table maintenance provides in fast queries. And table maintenance is something that a lot of folks are not necessarily that aware of and would probably rather not think about, because it's one of those things kind of like house cleaning that you would really, it's hard to get excited about. But what table maintenance provides is continuous cleaning of your table to make sure that it's always at peak performance. And so you can imagine that if you have an engine that's always looking at your table, always optimizing the number of files that it creates, the way it stores data within those files, the way it organizes data, then it's always going to perform better. And that's what Polaris does. And then it provides a table maintenance policy here for you to control things like, how often should my file be compacted? How often should I take a snapshot, and how many files should be in the snapshot, that kind of thing. So once I have this, I can communicate to a variety of other tools about how my table should be maintained. Credential vending is a feature that Tomer touched on, and it's one of the cornerstone features of Iceberg Catalog REST. It provides very, very convenient access to tables without you worrying about the ultimate credential from the S3 or ADLS storage bucket to get the table. When I created the demo that I want to show in a couple of minutes, the table from my catalog had data stored on ADLS. And so when I saw that, I thought, how am I going to get the credential for ADLS? What is that? I don't even know what that is. Well, all I did was turn on vended credentials. And what vended credentials means is that the catalog hands you a temporary credential that it got from the bucket to authorize your access to the data, just that one table, for a brief period of time. This is fantastic, because what it means is that that credential is narrow in scope. It is limited in terms of time, but it gives me access to the table that I want to access without worrying about anything else. So vended credentials are an amazingly popular and wonderful thing. I can get them here through all the basic cloud providers. Notice here I've tried to show the technologies here on AWS, on Azure, and on GCS. So if you're a cloud junkie and you are following AWS specifically, it uses something called a STS token to give you specific access to a specific table for a specific period of time. But it's all done under the auspices of the catalog so that you don't have to worry about anything else. This is basically how it works. We're the query engine. We're going to ask the catalog for the table. It's going to come back with a vended credential that we have to assume a role to STS to get, and then we're ready to perform our request to the data. Now, maybe the most important thing about this diagram to show is that the accumulation of metadata and the access to data are two separate operations. Because in many, many cases, what you need is access to metadata of the table. You need to know how many columns, how many rows, what is the data in the table. That's all metadata. And so you gain access to that through one operation. And then when you have the metadata, or if you're actually going to do a query of the data, that's a separate operation directly to the bucket that has the data. So by separating these two things, we gain efficiencies, because now we know which of these operations you want to perform at any one time. What I've showed here is that, as great as Apache Polaris is, what Dremio has done, and its version of Apache Polaris called the Open Catalog, is build some additional functionality on top. And the reason for that is because even though we created the Apache Polaris catalog in 2024 with Snowflake, and we put a bunch of features into it, it's still accumulating features. And we're still driving additional features into the catalog as quickly as we can, because we're driving the open standards forward. So for example, look at this. RBAC is fully integrated with them both. Table maintenance is actually a bit more sophisticated with Dremio's product because it's automatic. We don't even ask you to create a table maintenance policy. We automatically clean up the tables according to what you're probably going to want, so that they're equally as performing as any other format, and away we go. We've already integrated them with the IDP of your choice. We've already integrated them with other S3 compatible storages. And we've done a variety of other points of integration in that flowchart that I was showing earlier. So what you get with Dremio is not only a catalog, but you get it integrated with so many other things out of the box. One of the things that I want to point out is that Dremio today is the only product I know of that supports fine-grained access control. This is the ability to filter individual rows or columns of a table. Polaris actually does not yet have this feature. And the reason why I highlight this is because we're very actively working to insert that feature into the open standard, so that by next year, is our anticipation, it will be through the standards approval process, and not only Dremio will be able to filter on these tables, but Spark or any other engine will be able to perform the same kinds of row filtering or column masking policies that Dremio can now perform. This is a small snapshot of what we anticipate some of the great things coming out of the Iceberg process to be, because Dremio is advancing the standard forward at a rapid rate. Since we were one of the founders, we're fully aware of some of the great things that we want the catalog to do, and so we're driving the standard forward by inserting these technologies over the course of future releases. I've mentioned that the fine-grained access control feature is coming very soon, and it's already being very actively worked. Next after that is something called table sources and etc. So let me tell you a little about those. We've mentioned a bit about fine-grained access control. It's going to be one of the first things on this chart, and it's so eagerly anticipated because you will be able to control the visibility of your table not only by delegating a privilege, but down to individual rows or columns. In the table sources space, this feature will give you the ability to access not only Iceberg tables, but other tables from the same catalog. At the last Databricks conference, which was a few months ago, they had a big user conference in San Francisco, and I went to a session that had thousands, the biggest session I attended, thousands of people in a humongous room, was talking about how you can get CSV tables into your Unity catalog. And it just kind of impressed upon me how many people have CSV files and they need to bring those forward, and that was the #1 thing that I saw people get more excited about than anything else. Table sources brings that same kind of functionality to Polaris, so it will not only be the home for your Iceberg tables, it'll be the home for your CSV files, your JSON files, your unstructured data, and all these other kinds of data formats will fit into Polaris as well as Iceberg does today. We've got a couple of other future features coming. One of them is operational metrics. Wow, could never get enough operational metrics, right? And there are going to be an increasing number coming from the Polaris community. One of the things that Dremio wants to do is to drive your table maintenance from operational metrics. And so the kinds of things I'm imagining are this. We can see you've done some insertions, and those insertions have generated this number of small files, and that's going to trigger a table maintenance function to clean up those small files. Or we can see you're doing a lot of writes, and those writes are of a certain format, so therefore we should compact, or we should vacuum because you've let a lot of stuff go recently. These are the kinds of things that will all become automatic in Polaris as it becomes more instrumented with operational metrics. Finally, we have a future proposal for an OPA-based authorization engine. OPA is an authorization engine that allows you to write policies for the computation of privileges and other things of that nature, so that you could have ABAC-style functionality on top of a catalog like that. So let me wrap up by showing you all of the ways you could potentially become more involved with either Iceberg Catalog REST or Apache Polaris if you choose to do so. There's a ton of information available. I want to show you a little demo here in a couple of minutes of what I have created, and I'm even willing to share the demo with you because it's all interfaces that are publicly available. You could become a member of a working group. You could watch the mail list. You could make a proposal of your own. If you're interested in a certain feature, this is an open community of a whole bunch of people working together, and that's what's great about Apache and the projects within it.